TAD Talks, where the Tennessee Aeronautics Division, TAD, quickly covers program updates, news, and discusses important topics in Tennessee aviation. I'm JP Solvector, Director of Aeronautics, your host for this TAD Talk. Today we'll be talking about scoping meetings. To better understand scoping meetings, we'll talk with Christopher Starr, who is the manager of our Office of Project Development and Delivery. Christopher, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, JP.
So we've been putting a lot of emphasis on scoping meetings, and you and I have seen several questions come up. So let's see if we can unpack a few things related to scoping meetings. So to start off, what are scoping meetings?
Thank you, JP. So with that, in terms of scoping meetings, what they are is an opportunity to have a discussion, to talk about alternatives, exchanging of information, as well as determine feasibility of the actual project itself. It is the first step in planning and also project formulation phases. Don't get that confused with the idea of pre-construction meeting, because those are incredibly important by themselves, and that happens after the bid has actually been awarded. And basically at that point, you're executing the contract with the contractor itself. The other thing that scoping meetings does for you is an opportunity to define the requirements of that actual project, and it helps with the viability of the project in terms of eligibility as well as funding. The other thing that's incredibly important, JP, is the ability to include all of the actual stakeholders. So it's not just the airport sponsor, it's the airport sponsor, it's the consultant for the airport, as well as the individual from TDOT Aeronautics. Specifically, if it is during the environmental as well as the preliminary design phase itself, is incredibly important to include the planning environmental staff from TDOT Aeronautics. If it's outside of that, you can try to include them, but more so the TDOT project manager from TDOT Aeronautics is incredibly important to have in all of those scoping meetings specifically. So with that, more so, just as a primer, is as soon as you have your ACIPs, your finals, it's best to go ahead and submit the environmental determination checklist in advance. That will help TDOT Aeronautics in terms of planning environmental to start scoping that out themselves. So then at that point, you as a consultant will have that information ahead of time.
Okay, yeah, it's a great explanation. Can you talk about the timing of scoping meetings and how they fit into the development, kind of overall development phases of a project?
Absolutely. So with that, they're always going to be held prior to the start of the work authorization. They're a vital component to a basically early coordination of the activities, and they should always occur before an application is submitted. If you submit an application into Black Cat and you haven't had a scoping meeting, you've done wrong. Essentially what should happen is you need that information as an airport consultant, as an airport sponsor, to understand the full scope of services that should be entertained and technically executed by that actual project, which may affect your actual amount of monies that need to be charged for that project as a consultant specifically. So with that, it's a vital component for that. It should occur right before you get to the actual application that's submitted into Black Cat. It also enables the consultant, like I said beforehand, to develop the required application documents like the draft work authorization, the man-hour estimates, as well as the fee proposal for honestly, an executed job that is done properly.
Gotcha. Okay. So we've talked about the what, the who, and the when. What about responsibilities? Who is supposed to initiate a scoping meeting?
That's a great question. So with that, and we'll get through in terms of I think in the next few questions maybe about the payment, but essentially with that, the airport or the consultant acting on behalf of the airport's behalf are responsible for the actual scheduling with that. And again, all of that happens after, of course, the ACIP has been finalized, because with that, it will have all the targeted dates that basically at that point the airport and their consultant are expected to come to TDOT Aeronautics with that project. And what that allows all of us to do specifically is to plan ahead. So then at that point, as soon as you get the actual final ACIP plan from our office that's been approved not only by us but also the FAA, you're welcome to go ahead and start submitting all the environmental determination checklist, as well as going ahead and schedule in advance the actual scoping meetings to start occurring, essentially. So the other thing, too, is that the airport and the consultant acting on behalf of the airports are also responsible for specifically the meeting agenda as well as the meeting minutes. And those are going to be absolutely critical to really truly understand what happened in the meeting, but also who is doing what after the meeting in order to make that project executed properly.
Really good points, and thank you for clarifying on that. Are there any other important points that you want to make just related to scoping meetings?
Absolutely. A few other caveats, like I was saying beforehand, is a few. One is specifically that they can occur in person, virtual, or a combination of the two. Basically, in person is generally recommended, especially for the more complex projects. If it's a very simple project, and to be honest, a virtual may be a perfectly good option. If it's to submit for like an equipment grant or something like that, very simplistic to where essentially it's not even a discussion. That could be honestly be done by an email. The biggest thing that I want everyone to be aware of, though, regardless, because this is work that has to be conducted too, especially if the consultant is doing it on behalf of the airport, is that the grant can also be backdated to include those costs. So essentially at that point, the only thing I need you to do as an airport consultant or as airport sponsor is make sure that the TDOT Aeronautics project manager is aware of it, so that the TDOT project manager specifically can ensure that that is actually on the grant request itself, so that when we go through our project staff review, we have that awareness essentially to ensure that that payment is made. And the back date is incredibly important as we actually create the grant itself with that date.
Yeah. Great information, Christopher. So, well, there you have it, everyone. We hope that you learned what scoping meetings are, why they're important, when they should happen, who is responsible, and who should participate in those, and a few important details as you move forward. That's it for this TAD Talk. Thanks for watching.